Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
I'll get this off his mic.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnu Bhadabang, Bhabrajikacharya, C. Aktabadana Samachara Prabhupada ki. Oh, Premanandi. Hari Hari. No, 181. Okay. Namo Vishwadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswata Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Pastacha Desha Tarane Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Caitanya Caritamrita Madhya Lila chapter 3 verse 81. Yeah, that's one. Teho yadi iha urahe tabe more sukha, karananinda hoijadi seha more dukkha. Translation, Sachimata said, it will be a great happiness for me if Nimai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stays here, but at the same time, if someone blames him, it will be my great unhappiness. Purport. It is a great happiness for a mother if her son does not leave home to search out Krishna but remains with her. At the same time, if a son does not search after Krishna but simply remains at home, he is certainly blamed by experienced saintly persons. Such blame certainly causes great unhappiness for the mother. If a real mother wants her son to progress spiritually, she had better allow him to go out searching for Krishna. The mother naturally desires the welfare of the son. If a mother does not allow her son to search for Krishna, she is called Ma, which indicates Maya. By allowing her son to go as a sannyasi and search for Krishna, Sachimata instructs all mothers of the world. She indicates that all sons should become real devotees of Krishna and should not stay at home under the care of an affectionate mother. This is supported by Srimad Bhagavatam. Gururna sasyat, svajanona sasyat, pitana sasyat, jananina sasyat, daivamna tatsyan, napatischa sasyan, namochya jyat sumapeta mritum. No one should become a spiritual master, not a relative, father, mother, a worshipable deity, or husband, if he cannot help a person escape the imminent path of death. Every living entity is wandering within the universe, subjected to the law of karma and transmigrating from one body to another and from one planet to another. Therefore, the whole Vedic process is meant to save the wandering living entities from the clutches of Maya, birth, death, disease, and old age. This means stopping the cycle of birth and death. This cycle can be stopped only if one worships Krishna, as the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evamyo Vetti Tatvata. Chaktva Deham Punarjama Naitimam Eti Sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take its birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. To stop the cycle of birth and death, one has to understand Krishna as he is. Simply by knowing Krishna, one can stop the process of rebirth into this material world. By acting on Krishna consciousness, one can return to Godhead. The highest perfection of life is for a father, mother, spiritual master, husband, or any other family member to help others return home back to Godhead. That is the most preferred welfare activity for the benefit of relatives. Therefore, Satyamata, although the mother of Nimai Pandit, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, considered all the facts and decided to allow her son to go out and search for Krishna. At the same time, she made some arrangements in order that she might get news of all the activities of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is a statement concerning the sannyas of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So sannyas is one of the ashrams. It's the final ashram for a person in the Varna ashram system. System is made of varnas and ashramas. Varnas indicate one's gunas and one's profession. So one can be Sudra in Tamagun, and Vaishya in Tamagun, Rajagun, Kshatriya in Rajagun, Sattvagun, and Brahmana in Sattvagun, or at least prominently in these gunas. And that defines one's livelihood. One works at certain occupations according to one's gunas, so that is called Varna. And within that system, then, there are stages of life. These are called the ashramas. But the ashramas are restricted for different varnas. So the brahmanas go through all the ashramas, brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. The vaishyas and kshatriyas go through brahmachari, grihastha, and vanaprastha. And the sudras, no brahmachari life, no renunciation, just grihastha life. So in other words, they don't get educated, the sudras. So that's the basic system for the for Varnashram. So Lord Chaitanya also operated and conducted himself within that system, even though when he speaks, he indicates rejection of that system. But he acted within that system while he was doing Sankirtan and performing bhakti. So he was born in a Brahmana family, and then he could go through all the ashramas. That is brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas. Even at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, though the brahmanas could go through all of these ashramas, many of them just became brahmacharis and grihasthas, and that's it. Sannyasis were not that common. Vanaprasthas, maybe a few. But in any case, the brahmana has the privilege of going through all the ashramas. But as we see, it was quite rare that someone took sannyas. The usual procedure is, of course, that one gets educated as a brahmachari, then one gets married and supports himself by teaching or whatever, because he has knowledge at the time, as a brahmana. And then when he's older, he takes vanaprastha, and if he lives long enough, he can take sannyas. So naturally, as you get older, you become more detached. So that you could do that. There are exceptions. So one can take sannyas after being a brahmachari without becoming a grihastha at all, or a vanaprastha. One could take sannyas after being a grihastha. One can take sannyas after being a vanaprastha. So you have a choice of that. Traditionally, of course, different groups have done different things. For instance, in the Madhva Sampradaya, a person becomes a brahmachari, then he becomes a sannyasi. No, directly he becomes a sannyasi. In the Ramanuja Sampradaya, generally, they become a brahmachari, then they become a vanaprastha, or a grihastha, then a vanaprastha, then a sannyasi. So they go through the gradual process. But anyway, there's options for taking sannyas. But it's all based upon qualification. If one is qualified by great detachment, one could take sannyas at any time. So that's permissible. However, we do know, as quoted also in Caitanya Caritamrita, that in Kali Yuga, sannyas is not recommended. It's one of the forbidden things. So people are not allowed to do horse sacrifices and other things, plus no sannyas. So it is rather discouraged also in Kali Yuga sannyas, mainly because people are not very qualified for renunciation. Everybody's attached. And as I said, even in Lord Chaitanya's time, sannyas was quite rare. So there's a few people in the Madhva or Ramanuja Sampradaya, a few in the Shankar Sampradaya, and that's it. Not too many people out of all the people of India. Even today, the sannyasis are quite rare, not common among the whole population. So it's a rare thing. So it's considered forbidden in Kali Yuga, or at least discouraged in Kali Yuga. Nevertheless, we see it does take place. So Shankaracharya had sannyasis, he took sannyas. Vaishnavas like Ramanuja took sannyas, and he started lines of sannyasis. Madhvacharya took sannyas. So it is there also, even though it is, I say, not encouraged. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he also, yes, he did took sannyas. The disturbing part here, of course, is that he was very young again, and he was also married. So if you are married, generally you wait until you're older and you have children, and the children are grown up, and your hair is getting gray, and children can support themselves. Then you can take sannyas. But here, he got married, and then he had two marriages because his first wife died, and then he goes and takes sannyas when he's a young man in his 20s. So that's a little bit unusual. Here's his mother, of course, is there, and mothers are attached to their sons, particularly because she had another son. He also disappeared, took sannyas and went away with the sannyasi and whatever, and she never saw him again. So this is the only son. And the husband also was not there. He had died. So a little bit of a stressful situation for Sachimata, the mother. She has great attachment to him, and also she needs some support. So, we see, of course, her conduct was quite proper. And she permitted this, in spite of the fact that she had to suffer a lot for this, because he would go away. So sannyas, of course, means you renounce. Nyasa means to give up. Sannyas means give up everything. So the sannyasi gives up everything. He gives up all family connections to all family, mother, father, children, wife, everything. Yeah. That's sannyas. Therefore, he had to give up his wife and his mother. So Sachimata, of course, agreed to it. she acted as an ideal mother. Of course, as I said, she was, disturbed by this because she was so attached to him. At the same time, she permitted it because she understood the higher principle involved. So that what is the higher principle? That is what Prabhupada discusses in the purport. That the ultimate goal of life is not simply to be in household life and pass through life and get old. The whole purpose of life is to develop spiritual life. And in pursuance of that, then sannyas is one of those steps. Of course, we will also see in the teachings of Caitanya Mahaprabhu that he says, you can get perfection in any ashram. You don't have to be a sannyasi. You can be a grihastha, vanaprastha, brahmachari, or a sudra, or a vaishya, or kshatriya, or brahmana, or a mlecha. You don't have to be in the varnashram system, and you can get perfection. So Lord Chaitanya actually is teaching something even quite different from the whole varnashram system. And we see that in his teachings he also rejects the system as being inferior, in that it's dealing with the material body, etc. It's ultimately not dealing with the development of Krishna prema. So we see in his teachings that he puts less emphasis upon that, and he emphasizes that everybody can take to Krishna consciousness, everybody can get perfection simply by Nam Sankirtan. And then on the other hand, then he is actually following this system. He was a Brahmana, followed the Brahminical rules. He studied the Vedas, studied scriptures, became a Grihastha. Now he is going into the ultimate ashrama. So he is following the Varnashram system himself. And because he is following, he should also follow in an ideal manner. He should not just be a fake sannyasi. So he wants to follow the rules also. So with the rule, the most obvious rule is you have to break all your connections with all your family members. So therefore he has to leave his wife, he has to leave his mother, etc. And we see that when after he took sannyas, then he was quite strict in following all the rules there. Right? So he never again saw his wife or his mother. He went to Puri and he stayed there. They stayed in Navadvip, Mayapur, and they never went to see him. And he never went to see them. Of course, later on he actually went to see his mother once, but generally he kept himself separate. And throughout his life we see very, very strict as a sannyasi, following all the rules. But we also see because of bhakti and because of Harinam, he surpassed all the rules of varnas and ashramas. And he sometimes broke the rules. So we see that, for instance, the sannyasi shouldn't associate with, low-class people and whatever. And Haridas Thakur, on the other hand, was not even in the Varnashram system, so he was like an outcast. But Lord Chaitanya put him in the highest position, made him an acharya, which is kind of shocking for someone in the Varnashram system. But not only he gave him a position and a title like that, he also honored him. And every day he would actually go and visit him in Puri. And not only that, when Haridas Thakur passed away, Caitanya Mahaprabhu personally arranged for his passing away ceremony and personally dug the hole, carried him, placed him in the hole. He's not supposed to touch low-class people. Even not just sannyasis, but in general, the brahmanas don't want to associate with lower-class people, even the sudras, what to speak of a mlecha. But Lord Chaitanya, who sannyasi, who's very renounced and following all the rules, he is touching the body of Haridas Thakur and personally carrying out the ceremony and begging food for the ceremony afterwards, etc. So he tended also for his devotees to break the rules. And that's not the only example. We find other examples also. So in spite of following very strictly, the rules, he also tend to break the rules. And we see that also in terms of Caitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavatam itself, as I mentioned the other day, they tend to reject the rules in favor of bhakti. Don't break the bhakti rules, but the other things you don't have to follow so much. So therefore, Bhagavatam says you can give up your swadharma, yeah, your conduct as a kshatriya or a brahmana or whatever. Not important. More important is to surrender to Krishna. And the person who follows bhakti and the person who particularly chants the name of the Lord, he surpasses all of the varnas and all of the ashramas. So it is said that the dog eater, who's not even a Sudra, he's less than a Sudra, simply chants the name of the Lord once. He is more qualified than a Brahmana. Instantaneously, he surpasses. All of his, all of his karmas have been destroyed by chanting the name once. So that is the extent of the devotional service and holy name. It supersedes all the other rules. We have so many scriptures. We have the Vedas, very strict. And if you're a Sudra or a Malachi, you can't even utter the Vedas or hear the Vedas or look at the Vedas, or you can't even approach the Vedas. And of course, if you're a Vaishya Kshatriya Brahmana, then you're allowed to be a brahmachari and study the Vedas. Generally, the Brahmanas are the ones who did that. They study the Vedas, and then they follow all the rules very exactly. Along with the Vedas, then we have these, what are called the Smriti Shastras, which have all the complex rules you must follow in the Varnashram system, rules for Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, and of course the ashramas as well. They're very complex rules, and you're supposed to follow them. So these are the Smriti Shastras, like Manu Smriti. Those who follow them are called the Smartas, which we sometimes criticize because these Smarta Brahmins are following too many rules. So they are following the Smriti rules, that is, the rules of the Smriti Shastras, acting as a Brahmana very properly and doing all your rituals and whatever rules for bathing, rules for dressing, rules for speaking, rules for eating, and they have so many rules. So one who follows that's called a Smarta. But basically, he's following the Varna Ashram rules according to Smriti Shastras. Well, those rules are there. And this is basically the rules followed by all the people in the Varna Ashram system, as opposed to the people not in the Varna Ashram system. That means the Muslims and the British and whoever else was trying to come into India. So those are the outcasts, so to speak. And those who are high class would at least be within the system following all these rules, the Smritis. But we see that even Pancharatra, which is purely Vaishnavic scriptures, they tend to start to say, well, yeah, Varnas, ashramas are there, but still, if you take Diksha and get your mantra, it doesn't matter what ashram, what Varna you are. And even if you don't have an ashram or a Varna, you get your mantra at Diksha. Then you're qualified to worship the deity. And we're not concerned about your Varna or your ashram or anything. So we see that there's a little more freedom there. Only qualification is you have to get the mantra. And who decides? The Guru. If Guru wants, he decides you're qualified by bhakti, then he'll give you the mantra. You can worship the deity regardless of Varna, ashram, or whatever. So in that sense, Pancharatra is a little more lenient in that and starts to break away from the Smritis and the Vedas. But then we come to a work like Bhagavatam, and this kind of rejects everything, all the Smriti and all this, all the rules for Varna, ashram. It's less important, whatever. And then we get to the Bhagavatam. It says, "Oh, you just chant the holy name of the Lord once, and you're also beyond it." So you're more qualified than anyone. Yeah. So this argument continued for some time, even with Lord Chaitanya's movement. And Brahmanas would criticize, oh, these Gaudiya Vaishnavas chant the holy name and do bhakti, and they're not even in the Varnashram system, some of them, and yet they're worshipping deities. How is it possible? So, of course, it is possible, because even the Pancharatra Shastras say, yes, if you're, doesn't matter if you're, Brahman or not Brahman, or even you're not even a Sudra, if you got the mantra, you're qualified. You're higher than a Brahmana. So it doesn't really matter. So they challenge that, Of course, if we see from Bhagavatam, even there's no real consideration for Pancharatra as such, because you simply chant the holy name and you're superior. You don't even have to take the Diksha mantra to become qualified by Pancharatra. You simply chant the holy name and you're more qualified than a Brahmana. So anyway, these different scriptures are there, and they have their own place, but nevertheless, when we get to Bhagavatam, and then when we get to Caritamrita, we see that everything becomes less important. And the most important thing is bhakti, and then within bhakti, chanting the holy name. So that's why I mentioned the other day that ultimately it is said you chant the name of the Lord, and it doesn't require even diksha, and you can get the highest perfection. So, of course, in the Pancharatra scriptures, it will say that you have to get the mantra, you have to take diksha, then you can do archana, then you can get prema. And then Caitanya Charitamrita says, no, you just chant the holy name, you get prema, and you don't need diksha. You don't need the mantra. Because mantras are there, but higher than the mantras, that is the diksha mantras, etc., is Hare Krishna. Mahamantra, it's higher. So therefore, we see that there's ultimately, when we get to the strongest, most powerful means, the other means become less important. They get superseded by the highest principles. So we have Vedas with their mantras, etc. Then we get in the Smritis with all the rules for Varnas and Ashramas. But then higher than that, we get process of bhakti, goes beyond Varnas and Ashramas. And then within bhakti, beyond that, we get chanting of the holy name, so it even supersedes Pancharatra, etc. So that's the basic idea behind Caitanya Charitamrita and proclaiming the highest position for Nam Sankirtan. Everything else, secondary, secondary, secondary. You can do it as long as it doesn't interfere with your chanting of the holy name and your progress in bhakti. But where it starts creating problems, and you reject it again. So in that sense, we get the highest thing represented. The problem comes because we do have these most essential statements of Bhagavatam and Caitanya Charitamrita, but then we do have the counter statements, which also come up. So, for instance, we'll find in the Madhya Lila there, I think, what is it, chapter, whatever it is, I think 15, 108, I think it is. And there, this is the statement that says that if you chant the holy name, you don't require purusharya, you don't require diksha. And then in the purport, it was just most confusing for most devotees. It starts out by saying, okay, yeah, the holy name is beyond all these processes of Pancharatra and Vedas and whatever. Then there's a middle section that says, you have to take initiation. If you don't take initiation, your life is wasted. So then people say, oh, well, okay, I have to take initiation. But then this contradicts the very verse itself in the first paragraph. And then if we get to the end, again, Prabhupada repeats it again. So therefore, holy name is independent of everything, and you don't need initiation. So then you say, well, there's contradiction here. So then you get arguments, about different people that say, no, holy name is most important. They say, initiation is most important. So the reason for this, as I said, is because different scriptures are there, and they're going to say different things. If you go to the Smritis, they'll say, you have to be a Brahmana to worship the deity or whatever. And that's actually quoted also within that purport itself. Yeah, the whole idea is you take Diksha and become a Brahmana, then you're qualified to worship the deity. So then people say, you had to be a Brahmana to worship the deity. Huh? And that's exactly what the Smartas say. So, different scriptures are going to say different things. Smritis will say one thing, Vedas say another thing, Pancharatra says another thing, and then Bhagavatam and Chaitanya say another thing. So this is can be resolved by understanding different levels. The scriptures are speaking to different people with different qualifications on different levels. And therefore, they encourage people to follow that system. Just as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, some people worship devatas. They have no faith in Vishnu or Krishna, so let them worship devatas. And then Krishna says, I give them the faith by which they can worship devatas. How does he do that? He supplies scriptures. So we get the Shiva Purana, the Linga Purana, the Skanda Purana, they're glorifying Shiva as supreme. He is ultimate Bhagavan. If you don't worship Shiva, your life is wasted. Vishnu is inferior. The scriptures will say that. And if you're dedicated to Shiva, then you believe this. And then when you see Vishnu Purana or Bhagavatam, you say, oh, that's all nonsense. So within scriptures, you'll see contradiction also. Within different scriptures, dedicated to different devatas, dedicated to Varnashram or Karma Yoga or whatever, dedicated to Jnana, Upanishads, and you'll find the contradictions there. And there'll be glorification of particular deities and particular processes as being the highest thing. What's the resolution? We see that very clearly represented in Bhagavad Gita at the end, where Krishna says you give up everything and just surrender to Krishna. So yeah, statements are there for people on different levels, but the highest level is there. If you want the highest thing, get to the highest level, then reject everything else. So that's basically the position of Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavatam. If you get to the process of bhakti and surrender to the Lord, if you take up the chanting of the holy name, everything else, we don't have to take it as absolute. Those scriptures are saying, yeah, if you don't do this, your life is wasted, finished. If you don't follow Swadharma, you're finished. That's, Karma Yoga, Varnashram, etc., Smriti Shastras. And Pancharatra say, if you don't get your Diksha mantra, you're finished. You can't progress. But then Bhagavad says, worship Krishna. If you don't do that, everything is finished. And Chaitanya says, you don't hold, holy name is everything. It's the only thing. So don't do anything else. Just chant the holy name. So this is how we resolve the contradictions, by seeing what is the ultimate goal, highest goal, what is the highest process, and then relate everything to that as relative praise and relative injunction, but not final injunction. So that's the way in which we can resolve these different contradictions. Okay, any question there?
So I was just saying the highest is chanting a holy name. Through holy name you can get prema, but presumably there's different levels of chanting. So unless you're on the level of Sudanam chanting, I mean, on a lower level you're not going to get prema, is that right? Yeah,
so there's different types of chanting. Whereas we have Namaparad, which we don't want to do because it destroys bhakti. Then we have Namabhas, which has two types. Ajamil Namabhas, where it's no devotion at all, it's just accidental. And then we have Namabhas, where you intentionally chanting, you're a devotee, but you got mixed bhakti or whatever, that's called Namabhas also. You have anartas and mixed bhakti, mix it with karma and desires, etc., or liberation, whatever, then it's called mixed bhakti, and then it's impure, that's called Namabhas also. And then we have pure chanting, in which we chant only to attain Krishna Prem and serve Krishna eternally, and we're not asking for material benefits or liberation. The same as pure bhakti. So Sudanam and pure bhakti, more or less, we say the same thing. The definition given by Rupa Goswami at the beginning of Nectar Devotion, Anya Abhilashita Shunya, that applies. It's the same as the Sudanam, same thing. So with that, you get prema. If you do the namabhas, you can get liberation, which means, of course, and you can also get better than liberation because you're doing bhakti mainly. You can get purified slowly through that process, because if you get liberation, you have to be purified. And you can get beyond liberation, like Brahman or whatever, because your goal is not to merge. You also have some devotion to Krishna. So you can get Sarupya and Salokya and Sarshti in the spiritual world. So you have some sort of relationship with the Lord there, obviously, and you don't have any material desires. But you don't develop, let's say, full prema. You can develop like a little bit of Shanta Rati, which is right next to Shanta Rasa. Yeah, so that's as far as you get through the namabhas.
So this level of, say, Shantaras, and that's in the Vaikuntha planets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would one be completely satisfied with that?
Yep. We see the Kumaras are in Shantarasa. They see the Lord and they get ecstatic symptoms, their hair stand on end, they're trembling when they see Vishnu. So they have Sattvika bhavas, Vyabhichari bhavas, all the different bhavas are there, but they're kind of weak compared to the higher rasas. So that's there. And, with Shantarasa, you have a relationship with the Lord. It's called a rasa, but it is, Prabhupada calls it neutral rasa because it's relatively weak and less service involved there. And that's what is achieved by many people who have previously done a lot of austerities and jnana along with their bhakti, and then they kind of give it up, but they still got influenced by that.
It seems the example of Gopa Kumar, he was going to so many different places, but he wasn't really satisfied there. So I guess ultimately his constitutional position was actually Goloka Vrindavan.
Well, because he got Krishna mantra from the very beginning, and he was doing that, then he developed attraction for Krishna and nothing would satisfy him. So that ultimately is said that it was the Vishnu and Narayan, he actually said, I became the guru and I gave you the Krishna mantra. So it was a little plan of the Lord himself to get him to Krishna Loka.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So you've outlined all these conflicts that sort of exist within the Varnashram system. And we know Prabhupada, before he left, said half of his work was still yet to be done because he wanted to introduce Varnashram. Is the importance of Varnashram then just because most people are not interested in spiritual life, so therefore they just get caught up, or at least put within a system where they're being elevated by the rules and regulations? Is that why it's important?
Well, this is a controversial. We don't know what Prabhupada meant by Varnashram as such when he said, half my work is unfinished. And this makes it a little difficult to implement it. He's talking about Varnashram for devotees or Varnashram for public. It's quite different, obviously. So which one does it mean? Even that we can't resolve. And then whoever it's for, what does it mean? Does it mean we want Varnas? And we're kind of fit people as Sudras and Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, Brahmanas? That is kind of contradictory to our whole idea that we're beyond the Varnashram system, and it's an offense to think of a Vaishnava as a Sudra or like that. It's kind of, we don't want to start putting material designations on people, so obviously it cannot be that. So what would that Varna be? And of course, one thing is, okay, we have Varnas, we have professions, and it should not be by birth. That's already there in the material world and around the world. Nobody's getting occupations by birth, except in India, maybe there's a few brahmanas who are forcing their kids to be, Brahminical or whatever, but otherwise it's not even present in the world at all. So, and everybody does have an occupation of some sort, usually inclination towards an occupation, and they have it. So then it's already there in one sense, in that sense. So ashramas themselves, no problem. We already have ashrams in ISKCON. To implement that among public, that's going to be a difficult thing. It's more difficult for them to do that than to do Hare Krishna. So, is Varnashram for people who are not qualified for bhakti? That, of course, is the normal thing within, India or whatever, the culture, that if you're not qualified for bhakti, then you do Varnashram at least. And then through that, you become a little purified and by association, you could take up bhakti eventually. But that's very difficult to establish in the modern world, even in India, what to speak of the West, to make such a system, reconstitute such a system, yeah? Once it's half destroyed or it's not there at all. To make that system would require so much effort. For how are you going to get people in another culture to start organizing themselves into varnas and ashramas? Even the ashram is difficult. What to speak of the varnas? It's so difficult that it does require a king, and nobody wants a king these days either. So a whole government or whatever, you can't really do it. So on that level, no, you can't do it. Varnas and ashrams won't work at all. For public, that is. For devotees, then, as I said, the whole varna idea is a little bit foreign because we don't want to start labeling people like that. So then what is it that we want to follow in the varnashram system, or that Prabhupada indicated by that? In some places, Prabhupada said, yeah, okay, we follow varnashram. I said, it's not so important. More important we do bhakti than we do varnashram or whatever like that. It's varnashram doesn't lead to bhakti or whatever. And of course that's the Bhagavatam also says that, and Lord Chaitanya is also saying we don't want it. It's external or whatever. So we get even Prabhupada both conflicting statements. It would be interesting to see just how many statements Prabhupada makes where he favors varnashram for actually implementing it, and actually those where he rejects it. So we could have started enumerating the statements. I don't know if anyone's done it, but maybe. And maybe it's 50-50 or something like that. So then what do? Prabhupada says both things. So it's difficult. So maybe the simplest solution was, okay, varnashrams with the varnas and ashram difficult. So just take the essence out of it. What is the essence of all of that? So maybe it's the four regulator principles, as first canto of Bhagavatam there with the sinful activities and things like that, and the four pillars of Dharma, whatever. So avoid four sinful activities. Maybe that's the simplest way to get the people of the world to do varnashram in quotes or whatever. Maybe that's the simplest thing that you do. To get something more complicated than that was difficult. Of course, even to get the four regulator principles, that's kind of difficult also. And it's easier to get them to chant Hare Krishna than follow four regular principles. So, there's a lot of unsettled things about what does the varnashram mean, and then how you implement it and whatever, whether it's for devotees and whether it's for outside people, the rest of the world. So we get caught up in that. But anyway, as for per Caitanya Caritamrita Bhagavatam, ultimately it's less important than the bhakti and Nam Sankirtan. The Yuga Dharma is obviously Nam Sankirtan, not varnashram. So we can't get too sidetracked by it.
Maharaj, someone could take your class today and come to the conclusion, I don't need Diksha, which means I don't need Guru, I just have to chant. Now, you can't understand scripture without Guru, and you can't achieve prema without the blessings of Guru. So without Diksha, the Siksha has to be there, something has to be there.
Yeah, so of course, the verse I'm quoting from Caitanya Caritamrita is, it doesn't depend on Diksha. It doesn't say anything about Shiksha. It doesn't say anything about Guru. It's just Diksha, which means Pancharatra, and deity worship, basically. Of course, we do deity worship and whatever, but our main process is Nam Sankirtan. Everything is supporting that, rather than the other way around. So it doesn't depend on Diksha. It doesn't mean it's independent of Diksha. It doesn't mean we reject it also. It's just that we shouldn't take that as the most important thing. That's all. But as I just pointed out, that if we want prema, we have to chant pure name. If we want pure name, then we have to give up the mixtures, whatever. And to do that, then we need teachings. We have to have proper conception of who is God and who is not God, who is a devata, what is mixed bhakti, what is pure bhakti, like that. a pure devotional service, etc. We have to have that knowledge, so we have to at least get the shiksha, which means we should have a shiksha guru of some sort. Yeah? So, and if you wanted to deity worship, which is also one of our processes, then we need the mantras for that, so we have to take the diksha. But ultimately, the main thing is chanting the holy name, and to do that, then we need the knowledge through the scripture, because Prabhupada gave all these books, so we have to read them, and we need a guru for that.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So Bhagavad Gita is one of our basic scriptures, and in the Bhagavad Gita we have the key slokas. You mentioned Sarvadharma Parityaga in the 18th chapter. One of the other key slokas, maybe you could elaborate on that, is the 434, of course, Tadvidi Pratyana. So just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, and he will impart knowledge unto you. So in the purport there it also says, so spiritual knowledge is revealed in the heart of the disciple by the Guru's grace. Yeah. So when the disciple develops humility and the Guru is pleased with the service of your disciple, so knowledge is revealed. Yeah. So it sort of alludes to the fact that Diksha, that's sort of like, is Prabhupada alluding to the fact that Diksha is the essence of what, the basic which the knowledge is revealed.
But he doesn't mention Diksha there.
No, he doesn't mention Diksha.
No, he mentions Guru.
Yeah.
So,
but on
and
the
the
other
verse
hand,
is about a person who has knowledge, imparts knowledge. So it's a Shiksha Guru, basically.
Well, it's just a hard perspective as we've been growing up in the Krishna conscious movement.
And you
that
assume
the
it means,
Guru
you assume it means Diksha, but actually it's broader enough to include both, obviously. But it's not specifically you need the Diksha Guru to impart the spiritual knowledge, because if we look at Bhagavatam, for instance, how is the teaching carried on? How does Sukadev carry on the line to Parikshit? Teaching. No Diksha. Didn't give him Diksha. It was teaching. And everybody else in Bhagavatam is all Shiksha. Narada Muni to Vasudev. Shiksha, not Diksha. The only Diksha we see is Narada Muni gives a mantra to Dhruva. That's the only place I can see, clearly where there is a Diksha mentioned. But otherwise it's all Shiksha. And if you look at all the statements about, you have to accept Guru, and then the meaning of scripture is revealed, which usually come from, Upanishads, like Svitasara Upanishad or Mandaka Upanishad, etc. Actually, you look at the text itself, it's in the context of a Shiksha Guru, not a Diksha Guru. It is somebody in the ashram, and he goes to this teacher in the ashram, and he gets teachings, and then there's this whole verse about, you have to accept the Guru and get the Shiksha from him. Yeah? So it's actually Shiksha Guru that they're glorifying as the medium for getting knowledge, in most cases. Yeah. If we look at the beginning of the Caitanya Charitamrita, the whole section there on Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru are equal. Yeah, they're equal, which means they have equal potency. So it's not that one is better than the other. And the Diksha Guru is represents Madana Mohan, and the Shiksha Guru represents Govinda Dev, the deity in Vrindavan. So if we want to get Shiksha from Govinda Dev, what's the problem? Yeah.
Are there examples of like we have Haridas Thakur and Lord Chaitanya accepting him as the Namacharya? Like in other sampradayas, which are, if I might say, a bit more closer to following the rituals of the Vedas, more smarta traditions. Are there examples of, great saints in those lines, like the Alvars, Andal, who weren't from the Varnas, outside of the Varnashram sort of?
Yeah. There is one famous Alabar who was actually less than a Sudra. He gets glorified and, like that. So there is example. And of course, Andal herself was a woman, and she's also an Alabar. She's put in the highest position. So you have examples in the Ramanuja Sampradaya of that, where they go beyond the caste also. At the same time, we'll find that after this, of course, that's there, and then we have their whole line from Ramanuja. Ramanujacharya also was somewhat revolutionary in that he did accept people, outcasts, and then he made them into devotees, and he gave them entitlement to worship the deity, etc. So he was also quite revolutionary in that sense. But we do also see that, in general, they are quite strict, and I don't know what it was at that time or later on, they just kind of got stuck into a little, conservative vein or whatever, but they are quite strict to following certain things of the Varna ashram. They'll do the Srada rites, etc. And even nowadays, if a person who is not a Brahmana or not in the Varnashram system is there, they won't eat together with the Brahmins. The Brahmins will not eat with them. They'll be separate. Certainly they respect them, but they're not going to eat together. They're separate. So there is some, consciousness like that still in these sampradayas, even though they say they're quite liberal in one sense, but still at the same time there's a little bit of conservative nature there.
Oh, did these examples that you gave, did they have disciples?
Who?
Or other followers, like Andal and the other Shudra?
They don't seem to have, not direct, but so it's the whole idea of disciple, of course, probably definitely some shiksha is there teaching somebody, but the concept of diksha is a little bit different also in the whole sampradaya.
Thank you, Maharaj.
In the Sri Sampradaya, they do follow the Pancharatric system of Pancharatric Diksha with the 5 samskars and all that. So they're quite conservative, following Pancharatra in that sense. Whereas in our Sampradaya, we take Diksha, but we actually don't really follow the Pancha Samskar and whatever. We just give the mantra finished and that's it. So there's no elaborate ceremony as, with the traditional 5 samskars or whatever you're supposed to do. Lord Chaitanya's got a mantra, and that was it. A few seconds, and whatever. Nityananda's got a mantra in his ear, and that was it. So they radically simplified the whole Pancharatric Diksha process to giving a mantra like that. What's that? Oh, the smartas. Yeah, well, immediately when Rupa and Sanatan, they worked for the Muslims, they were outcasts. They were, and they didn't, even though they became followers of Lord Chaitanya, even though they were honored by Lord Chaitanya, they did not try to force themselves back in the system at all. They considered themselves outcasts in one sense. So that's why they just, were off by themselves in Vrindavan and doing it. And they also didn't even initiate anybody. They just kept apart from the system, because socially it would disturb other people probably. Shiksha definitely did,
Haribol. Haribol Maharaj. When you mention Diksha, I assume you mean basically Pancharatric
Diksha, which means the mantras, the secret mantras you get then.
Diksha is not essential, and they think maybe.
Yeah. It is, actually it is. It's interesting how we evolve this ceremony where we get 2 dikshas, which kind of sounds a little impossible because you can only get 1 diksha in one sense, scripturally speaking. So, as I said, in the Gaudiya Sampradaya in general, the whole diksha was very simple. You get your diksha mantra from the guru, which is Krishna mantra. Lord Chaitanya got a 10-syllable Krishna mantra secretly, and that was it. He didn't reveal it to anybody when he got it. Nityananda, the same thing. So it's like just get the mantra, that's it. So they really simplified the whole Pancharatric ceremony of Pancha Samskar into just getting the mantra. And generally that's what was happening. You see that Janava, who was, wife of Nityananda, she gave Diksha, mantras, to many, many people, thousands of people. But it was just the mantra. That was it. Not all these complicated ceremonies or whatever like that. So, and that was basically the system where they carry on the Diksha line, they're giving mantra and like that. When we get to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of course, then he gives mantras, and so he carries on that line. But he also had this other ceremony, which he did not call Diksha, which we call giving the name, Nam Dan. So he give beads to people and maybe give them a name, so-and-so, Krishnadas or Gauradas or something like that. Tell them to chant some rounds like that. So that was kind of a simple ceremony to encourage people to identify with the movement, like the Gaudiya Mat, like that. Yeah? So, but when they talk of Diksha, then it only meant what we call second initiation. So then Srila Prabhupada took the ceremony, and then he called it first initiation, and then we have the second initiation. So it becomes a little more confusing. What is the initiation? Because we got two initiations, whereas with Bhaktisiddhanta, there was only that second one was called the Diksha. And now we got two called Diksha, or initiation. So it becomes a little more confusing. But then, of course, the essential part for deity worship, getting the mantra, is in the second one. So in that sense, more important. But when asked, then Prabhupada said both things. One time he said, second initiation is real initiation. And which is true, because you're getting your Diksha mantra then. And that's, of course, the tradition. The Diksha mantra means Diksha. But then in another letter he says, first initiation more important. So then we were stuck with two things. What's more important? So the first initiation is more important in the sense there's more stress on chanting Hare Krishna there, and less on the deity worship and the mantras, etc. So in that sense, more important. And of course, we can say that it's, the shiksha is more emphasized more in the first than in the second, or whatever like that. So in that sense, yes, it's like a formalized shiksha in one sense, because holy name itself does not need diksha. And most people, when they are taking first initiation, are already chanting 16 rounds, so there's no secret about the mantra. They already got it. They've been chanting it for years on end, and then they're getting it again from Guru, so really they already have it in one sense. So basically he's just giving them guidance, and there's a connection to the Guru and a vow to the Guru, etc. So that's basically what it is, more than any formal diksha or whatever like that.
Maharaj, just a quick question. When Srila Prabhupada took initiation from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, was it along the same lines as what Srila Prabhupada introduced here in ISKCON?
Yeah, well, it's similar, yeah. When we talk about the Diksha, then he got the mantras.
So it was like a fire sacrifice.
Same mantras, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
One thing interesting about fire sacrifice, they don't do a fire, in Gaudiya Mat, they don't fire sacrifice for that first ceremony, which we call first initiation. You get some beads and whatever, and that's it. There is a fire sacrifice attached to second, what they call Diksha. But that fire sacrifice actually is not for getting your mantras, your Krishna mantra or your Gauranga mantra. It's for getting the Brahma Gayatri. Yeah, so there's a Vedic samskar for that, called Upanayinam samskar. So they go through that whole Upanayinam samskar with the Vedic mantras, and you get a danda and whatever, and they chant the Vedic mantras. And then you get your Brahma Gayatri mantra from the Guru, whatever like that. So that's where the fire sacrifice there is in the Gaudiya Mat. In ISKCON, then we do it for both, and it's not really Vedic at all. It's just Hare Krishna, Swaha, whatever. I think we do have to end here. Okay.
There's a lot of power, isn't there, in making the vows to follow the four regulatory
Is there power?
principles. When in the first initiation, when the devotee makes those vows to follow the four regulatory principles and to chant 16 rounds every day, don't you think that really makes it powerful, that the vows plus it makes them feel part of the ISKCON family?
And vows in any case are powerful things, but you can do vows outside of initiation also. And in fact, it's talking about it later on in the Caitanya Caritamrita. It says that chanting Hare Krishna is independent of Purascharya, and Purascharya itself is taking vows of chanting your Diksha mantra in order to get a certain goal like liberation or whatever you want, or go to Brahmaloka or whatever you want. And then you have to do certain things, chant so many times and do so many austerities and this and that, whatever. So it's kind of a vow in itself. Huh? So vows can be there for, even for second initiation, you can have vows also. I don't know if they do it now. They do vows for second initiation. But anyway, you could have vows there also if you want. And by formalizing vows itself, of course, a person becomes more serious. So, yeah, you can do it at first initiation, but even if it's not first initiation, you could have vows also. And you could have a Shiksha Guru and have vows and not call it initiation, but call it Shiksha and have vows there also. You could do that. So, it could be just the same thing, actually. Basically the same thing. Okay, I think we have to end here.